everyone, it's Missy. It's 19 weeks after the last frost, and we have a few more things to do out in the garden before it freezes. Now, with the tomatoes, you want to pull up and clean your support stakes and cages. Of course, all crops, you want to turn under any remnants of vines or plants. With the cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower, you can actually leave the plants alone in the garden, and this is to help deter cabbage worms in next year's crop. And then with the buckwheat, once the frost comes, it kills the plants entirely, and then you can turn them under. If you have Brussels sprouts, you can harvest the sprouts after frost. Otherwise, we're going to prepare the soil for planting our garlic, and you can dig and pot up a clump of chives if you want for indoor use. Now, I do have a clump of chives, but I am not planning on digging up a clump of it to use indoors. I'm just leaving it alone. But let's go out and get into the garden. So I pulled up our tomato plants weeks ago, and I took down the fencing that I had to support the plants, and I put them on the north side of the barn. I am planning on leaving these stakes here in the garden because I'll be using these for the melons when I bring them over to this part next year. I am gonna turn over the tomato plants. As you can see, they've decomposed very well, and you can do this by either tilling it into the soil with a garden tiller, or if you need to, you can spade it over by hand. But I'm definitely going to have to get this done this week. Over on the other side, you can see where our melons were. These have all been harvested, and of course the plants have completely decomposed as well. The straw that you see in the newspaper, that's what we laid down when the plants were growing to keep the melons off the dirt, and that can be turned over into the soil as well. Now, the squash I just harvested not too long ago, and the plants are still kind of green, but definitely go in there and turn that over. If you turn it under the soil, it will help the plants decompose faster. Other than that, I'm still waiting for our frost. As you can see, my winter rye is really getting thick and coming along, and it just looks really good. The only volunteer items that I had were these peas on the end, which I don't even see any flower. Oh yeah, I do. They are starting to flower on the end over here. So if we don't get a frost soon, I guess I'll be harvesting a second crop of peas, which is very unusual for me. But you can see that I need to get hoeing in here and get those weeds down before they turn into seeds. So that's our pathway in between our corn and our peas this past spring. Taking a look at our buckwheat, you can see that it's blooming again. I have had to cut the blooms off once a week just to stay ahead of it. Now, they are predicting a frost for us come the end of this week, so I'm hoping that if I wait long enough, I don't have to do another cutting. But the buckwheat has turned out to be a really good cover crop, and I don't really have too many weeds growing in the patch where my beets were, or where my potatoes were. Now, you can see weeds along the pathway. Like I said, I have to get out here and hoe. Just haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. On the other hand, I do have my cabbage I did leave out here. It did form some smaller heads on the side after we had cut the main head. I will not be harvesting these because we do have cloverworm issues already in those heads, I know, and I just don't like wormy cabbage. But we did have the main head, and that provided us plenty of cabbage for our use. But I'm just going to leave the plant alone, of course weed around it, and keep it in the garden and see if it helps deter the cabbage worm moths next year. Basically, the way I understood is that there is an enzyme that will live in the cabbage plant, and then it will transfer to the new cabbage or Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, whatever you're growing, and it will kill the cabbage worms as they come. So I'm hoping that is true in our area. It's going to be an experiment for me, so we'll see. So the last thing on my list was to prepare soil to plant garlic. Now, I've had quite a few issues planting garlic. I have planted it in my garden in the fall before, and it grew, but as somebody commented in one of my other videos, my soil is very hard. Now, that's because I live in a region where I have heavy clay soil. I'm really close to the bedrock, so it's a lot of clay. And now I could, somebody said, well, you need to put more manure and organic matter. I live on a farm. We use compost, we use manure, we use organic matter, but that stuff builds up the soil. It takes time. And another thing is that this, I could take all this soil out and pay for really good garden soil to fill in the place, but that is going to be very expensive and I can't afford it. So I came up with this solution, which is to bury a pot in the ground and put the nice garden soil or potting mix inside the pot. Now this will allow me to control the soil content so that way my garlic isn't in heavy clay soil, and it will also allow me to grow it outdoors, because in a raised garden bed, which I do have good soil in there, but the problem is I tried that last fall, and when I grew it in a raised bed, the garlic froze. It never did grow. So I'm hoping by combining the raised garden bed theory of being able to control the soil content and putting it in the ground like I do my blueberry plants, the garlic will grow just fine. So I do have 2 of these pots, and that should give me enough garlic for next year's use. But I'm just going to, like I said, bury the pots, fill it with a nice quality potting mix, and I will grow my garlic in there next week. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.